Okay, welcome back. We're diving straight into Esther chapter 8 today.
A really pivotal chapter.
Absolutely. So, just to set the scene quickly, Haman, the villain, he's gone, executed.
A huge relief, you'd think. But not quite the end of the story.
Not at all, because the massive problem remaining is his decree, the one calling for the complete destruction of the Jewish people across the whole Persian Empire.
And it was sealed with the king's ring. That's the critical part.
Exactly. In Persia, a royal decree, once it's written in the king's name and sealed with his signet ring, well, it's irreversible. You can't just say, oops, never mind.
It has the force of absolute, unchangeable law. So the threat is still very, very real.
So that's our focus for this deep dive. How do Esther and Mordecai deal with this seemingly impossible situation? How do they possibly save their people when the law itself condemns them?
It's a fascinating legal and political puzzle they have to solve.
It really is. So chapter 8 kicks off right after Haman's fall. And King Xerxes acts fast. First thing, he gives Haman's entire estate. I mean, imagine the scale of that property and wealth. He gives it all straight to Queen Esther.
Which is significant. It's not just punishing Haman's memory. It's empowering Esther with immense resources, influence, property, wealth.
A major shift in power dynamics right there.
Yeah.
And then there's Mordecai.
Ah, yes, Mordecai. His fortunes changed dramatically.
Completely. Esther finally reveals their connection, that they're related, that she's Jewish. And because of this, Mordecai is brought into the king's actual presence.
He goes from being an outsider at the gate, mourning in sackcloth, to being welcomed into the inner circle of power. All because Esther took that risk earlier.
And Xerxes isn't finished. He takes off his signet ring.
The symbol of his ultimate authority.
Yes, the very ring he'd actually given to Haman earlier. He takes it back from, well, presumably Haman's effects, and gives it directly to Mordecai.
Wow. So Mordecai now wields the king's own authority, symbolized by that ring.
And to top it off, Esther, who now controls Haman's former estate, puts Mordecai in charge of managing the whole thing.
So Mordecai goes from potential victim to holding the king's seal and managing the vast assets of his defeated enemy. It's an almost unbelievable reversal.
Incredible. But even with all this Haman gone, Mordecai elevated Esther, wealthy and influential. Esther knows the fundamental problem hasn't been solved.
The decree, it's still out there, still legally valid, still counting down to the 13th of Adar.
Right. So the text tells us she goes back to the king again. She falls at his feet, weeping this time, and pleads with him to somehow stop Haman's plan, to revoke the edict against the Jews.
It's a powerful image. Even with her newfound security, her focus is entirely on her people. She's using her access, her relationship with the king, risking his potential annoyance even, to beg for their lives.
And her words are just heartbreakingly direct. She says, according to the source, "For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?"
She makes it deeply personal. She's not talking abstract policy. She's talking about watching her own relatives, her own community be slaughtered. She's appealing to his human connection to her.
So how does Xerxes react to this emotional plea? Well, he seems receptive. He reminds her, look, I've dealt with Haman. I gave you his estate.
He's basically saying, I've already shown you immense favor.
Exactly. But then he hits the wall. The legal reality, he tells them straight, a document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring cannot be revoked. Period.
There it is, the unmovable obstacle of Medo-Persian law. You can't just delete a sealed royal decree. It stands.
So if you can't cancel the death sentence, what do? This is where the king offers the ingenious solution.
The workaround.
Yes. He says, effectively, okay, you can't revoke the old decree, but you, meaning Mordecai, using the authority of the ring I just gave you, you write another decree. Write it in my name, seal it with my ring, and make it about the Jews. Write whatever seems best to you.
It's brilliant, really. He's not breaking the law. He's using the law against itself, layering a new, equally irrevocable law on top of the old one.
So the first decree stands technically. The permission to attack the Jews on Adar 13 is still there, but now there will be a second decree.
A counter decree, giving the Jews explicit royal permission to fight back vigorously.
It's like creating an antidote using the same system that delivered the poison. And they don't waste a second. The moment they get this permission, royal secretaries are called in. Immediately.
The text is very specific about the date, the 23rd day of the third month, Sivan, which is, only about 2 months after Haman's decree went out?
Something like that, yes. So there's still time, but the clock is definitely ticking. They need to get this new message out across that vast empire.
And the scale is just staggering. They write out Mordecai's orders because he's the one dictating this, with the king's authority to everyone who matters, the satraps, the governors, the nobles,
Across all 127 provinces, from India way over in the east.
all the way to Kush, which is down south, modern-day Sudan area. The reach is immense.
And think about the communication challenge. But they address that directly.
Right. The source makes a point of saying the orders were written out in the specific script and language of each province and each people group.
So everyone would understand it locally. No confusion.
And crucially, it adds, also written to the Jews in their own script and language.
That's key, isn't it? This isn't just administrative instruction. It's a direct message of empowerment to the Jewish communities themselves.
Absolutely. It's telling them you have the official backing, the legal right to defend yourselves.
And the authority is hammered home again. Mordecai writes it all in King Xerxes' name, and he seals it with that signet ring, the king's ring, now on his hand.
The same ultimate authority that sealed the decree of destruction now seals the decree of defense. The symbolism is powerful.
And then getting this life-saving message out there, it has to be fast.
Utmost urgency. The text highlights this. It says the decrees were sent out by mounted couriers.
Not just any couriers.
No, riding fast horses, the best available, described as especially bred for the king. Royal express post, essentially.
Using the empire's best resources to spread this news as quickly as humanly possible. So, okay, what did this new decree actually say? What were the Jews now officially allowed to do?
Well, the text breaks it down. First, they were given the right to assemble, to gather together.
Which is fundamental for any organized defense.
Exactly. Second, the right to protect themselves, to stand up for their lives.
And then it gets very specific, very forceful.
It does. They were granted the right to, and this is the language used, destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force from any nationality or province that might try to attack them, including their women and children.
So it's explicit permission to meet lethal force with overwhelming lethal force. It's purely defensive in nature, triggered only if they are attacked first, but the authorized response is total.
It levels the playing field, legally speaking. If someone tries to act on Haman's decree, they now face an enemy legally empowered to fight back hard.
And there's another layer, too. They were also given the right to plunder the property of anyone who attacked them.
Right, which directly counters Haman's plan, remember. His decree explicitly mentioned plundering the Jews' property as a motive for the attackers.
So this flips it. Now, attacking the Jews comes with the risk of not only losing your life, but also losing all your possessions to them. It's a strong deterrent.
Definitely changes the risk calculation for potential aggressors.
And the date set for this, the date when the Jews were authorized to exercise these rights.
The 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar.
Wait a minute. That date sounds familiar.
It should. It's the exact same day that Haman's original decree had designated for their destruction.
Wow. So they didn't change the day? They turned the day of expected doom into the day of authorized self-defense.
Precisely. The battle, if it happens, is set for that specific day, but the terms of engagement are now completely rewritten by this second decree.
And this wasn't some secret plan. This new edict was publicized everywhere, issued as formal law in every province, made known to people of every nationality.
Transparency was crucial.
And the reason given is explicit. So the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. It's almost like a public warning. Don't mess with the Jews on Adar 13th.
It served both to empower the Jews and to forewarn everyone else. Let potential attackers know this wouldn't be the easy slaughter Haman envisioned.
The narrative then loops back, emphasizing the speed again the couriers racing out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict is issued in Susa, the capital.
You get this sense of urgent, radiating waves of information spreading from the center of power, hoped traveling at the speed of the king's fastest horses.
And then we get this striking image of Mordecai. He leaves the king's presence after all this is done, and he's completely transformed.
How so?
He's wearing royal clothes, blue and white, the text says, a large gold crown on his head, and a robe of fine linen and purple.
Wow. That's not just elevated status, that's a public spectacle. It's a visual declaration of his position, his favor with the king, and by extension, the changed status of his people. A far cry from the sackcloth and ashes.
Absolutely, and the reaction is immediate. Right there in Susa, the capital city.
What happens?
The city holds a joyous celebration.
Interesting. The whole city, not just the Jewish population.
Seems like it. Maybe relief that a potential civil conflict was averted, or maybe just, people aligning with the new power dynamic. Hard to say for sure.
But certainly a public sign that the tide had turned.
But the real deep joy is among the Jewish people themselves, naturally. As the news arrives in each province, each city, the source says there was joy and gladness, feasting and celebrating.
You can only imagine the relief. The shift from terror and despair to hope and empowerment. It must have been overwhelming. A day that was marked for death was now marked for deliverance.
And then comes this final, really arresting detail at the very end of the chapter.
Is that?
It says, "And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them."
That is arresting. Conversions happening,
Yep.
but explicitly linked to fear.
Yes. Fear seems to be the stated motivation. Fear of this group that suddenly has the king's backing, the legal right to defend itself fiercely, and has just seen such a dramatic reversal of fortune.
It adds a really complex layer to the whole situation. Power, fear, influence, identity, all swirling together.
So just stepping back to connect the dots on the strategy here, it was genius, wasn't it? They couldn't break the rule about irrevocable laws.
So they used the rule, they layered a new, equally irrevocable law right on top of the old one.
Effectively neutralizing the first decree's threat without technically revoking it. It shows a deep understanding of how power and law worked in that empire.
And the importance of access. Esther's position, Mordecai gaining the king's trust, and his ring that was essential to even proposing, let alone enacting, this counter-decree.
It really highlights the dramatic swing from the brink of annihilation orchestrated by the holder of the king's ring.
To the Jewish leader himself, holding that ring and using it to authorize their defense and survival on the very day intended for their destruction.
It's an incredible turnaround. Chapter 8 basically flips the entire script for what's coming.
It does. It moves the story from impending tragedy to setting the stage for confrontation, but a confrontation where the Jewish people are legally armed and empowered.
So this deep dive really shows how Chapter 8 is the linchpin. It's where imminent destruction turns into authorized defense, secured through clever strategy within the existing system.
A powerful example of navigating seemingly impossible constraints by understanding and leveraging the rules of the game.
And it leaves us with that really provocative thought, doesn't it? Those conversions mentioned right at the end.
Driven by fear, the text says.
So as you think about this chapter, consider that. What does it suggest when people align themselves with a group out of fear following such a dramatic power shift? Is it genuine conversion? Is it pragmatic survival? What does it tell us about the complex effects of power and fear in society? Something to definitely mull over.